Alrighty, so I've been getting told to review the Durgod keyboards for ages now, with people telling me how good they are for the price. And I was lucky enough to visit the Durgod booth at Computex to check out their keyboards. And I thought there were some really sweet boards, but let's have a closer look at their main 10 keyless line, the K320. There's a couple of variations of the K320 that have different keycaps and different lighting options, but they all should fundamentally be very similar. The one I have here is the Taurus Corona K320. Big thanks to Banggood.com for providing this keyboard for review and for their continued support. First impressions in the hands feels great. There's minimal flex with that internal steel plate, and it's packing that classic mechanical keyboard heft at just over 900 grams. One of the things that people love about these boards are the aesthetics, and I'm on the same page. For those who are usual watchers, you know that I like the clean and simple aesthetic, and it's just more adaptable and can fit into any setup. Although kind of like the Varmilo keyboards, it's not a complete high profile design, as there is a considerable gap between the case and the keycaps. But it isn't a floating key design either. It does help slim down the appearance of the board, but at the same time exposes the key switches, which isn't as clean aesthetically, but yeah, not too bad at all. The only thing I don't particularly like are the lock indicator LEDs above the arrow keys. It kind of breaks that clean design, and I know that we need them, but still they're quite big in my opinion, but yeah, nitpicky from me. On the bottom there's a couple of rubber feet for non-slip, and there's 2-stage flip-up feet that are also nicely rubber tipped. There's the USB Type-C port, which is good to see, and the included cables we got in the box are specially designed to fit in the channel, making a really nice snug fit. The keycaps are where this keyboard really does shine for me. For the grey keyboard we have a light and dark grey colorway, which looks nice, but this of course is a backlit keyboard, and they have some of the best backlit keycaps on the market. They're double shot PBT, so the legend is another piece of plastic and won't fade away. They're about 1.5mm thick with the translucent plastic, and the legends are super clean. There's no seams, the font or typeface is simple, and they show off the backlighting beautifully. And to add to that, they're cherry profile, which are kinda like a community favorite. They're shorter than the typical OEM profile keycaps you find on most other keyboards, which personally makes them more comfortable to type on. But yeah, beautiful keycaps all around, which makes much more of an impact on the keyboard than you would initially think. As said, this is a backlit keyboard, and my version just lights up white, which I'm perfectly happy with. We can play around with the lighting by pressing FN, and it's cool how everything else turns off besides the secondary functions. And yeah, there's a bunch of patterns and effects that you can play with. We can further customize things with the Zeus engine software. The lighting is essentially the same thing with the different effects and such. In the performance section, we can disable a few keys and combos which may interrupt your gaming session. And in the customize section, we can customize each key to do pretty much whatever. But for the most part, you don't want to be messing with much on the default profile, as you probably want to use those keys for their intended purpose. So that's why you have to make a secondary profile. And then assign a key that you don't use often to switch profiles, because from what I can see, there's no function on the keyboard itself to change between said profiles. Otherwise you would have to do that on the software, which is pretty annoying. And then in the macro section, we can record whatever key sequence we want, and you can play around with the delays and such, and then you'd go back to the customization area to assign the macro to a key. So yeah, pretty simple overall. It's much like most other keyboard softwares, but yeah, it works, it's clean, and easy enough to use, so all good in my eyes. Underneath the caps, I have the delicate Cherry MX Silent Reds, which are light leaning switches, so there's no click or bump and are dampened. This does also come in the other Cherry MX variants, and the silent switches are usually more expensive, but it's awesome to see that it is an option. Of course they won't be dead silent, but they're certainly quiet. In short, the stems have dampeners, which in turn dampen the bottom and top out sounds, making them way more quiet than the traditional mech. But they don't feel sharp and can be perceived as a tiny bit mushy because it is dampened. I personally love silent switches, and they are more appropriate for sound sensitive environments. But what makes me happy is that the stabilized keys are not rattly. One of the worst things I've come across in mechanical keyboards are boards with silent switches but rattly stabs, because it completely defeats the purpose. But as you can see, these guys generously lube these stabs up. Okay, so I know I usually disassemble my keyboards, but I just couldn't get this thing apart because I was scared I was going to break something, and if I'm scared to break something after doing this so many times, it may be problematic for you guys. But we can already imagine what's inside, probably a solid steel mounting plate, a good old PCB, and a typical plastic enclosure. Alright, so overall, much of what many have said is true. They really are just good solid mechanical keyboards for a modest price. They're not in the low budget range, with their prices competing with the likes of Ducky, maybe a bit lower, and it competes on every other level as well. The build is good, much like Ducky's again, with the plastic enclosure and internal steel plate. The keycaps do set it apart though, and are some of the best backlit keycaps I've come across. Clean font with no seams, PBT plastic, decent thickness, and cherry profile, which I love. They're also very accessible, being available from a bunch of Chinese web stores, and of course I got mine from Banggood.com, so big thanks to them, and I'll chuck the links in the description if you want to check it out. Again, there's a few variations with the keycaps and lighting, and there's the full-size K310 if you need the numpad. But yeah, I'm glad that this sort of stuff is getting attention because it has a lot of what I like in a mechanical keyboard.